Episode 25. A Tale of Two Professors. When you ask about the time difference between London and Sarajevo, the standard response is, oh, about 20 years, which is appropriate for us, as we are back in the noughties, less than a decade since the end of a war which tore apart the country of the southern Slavs, better known as Yugoslavia. By some quirk of fate, it's suddenly winter here. Sorry. This time travel lark is proving trickier than I imagined. No wonder Doctor Who keeps regenerating. Anyway, we have endured the time shift and the mercifully short flight in Cattle class from Belgrade. After the bar for air travel had been set so low by the likes of Ryanair and SleazyJet, it must have taken quite something for a national carrier to limbo beneath it. But if our flight was anything to go by, this one has hit the nail on the thumb.
Oh.
Obviously, I can't name it, but it starts with Lufthansa. So here we are standing huddled in arrivals at the international airport of the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Well, I say arrivals, but a few meters down the modern concourse from this sign is another one for departures. We are on the lookout for my charity colleague, whose area covers a big chunk of southeastern Europe. With deference to the tricky political situation here and the huge popularity of the BBC's crime drama Line of Duty, let's call her H. It's a lot easier to pronounce and spell than her real name, and I think I got away without anyone spotting the anachronism. These little anomalies seem to be the time-travelling equivalent of leaves on the line. Or, more aptly, the wrong kind of snow, for there is plenty of snow to be getting on with, and it soon becomes clear that it's almost a miracle that the runways and roads are open. Our friend H tells us that only the day before yesterday, there had been a snowstorm of epic proportions, with nearly a meter of the stuff and 3-meter snowdrifts. And if you think they're exaggerating here, you can't have met many Bosnians yet. They are a pretty undemonstrative lot, perhaps as a result of hundreds of years of not being listened to. But the snowstorm really did break European records. Everything here is white, many buildings still appear to have no ground floor, but Sarajevo is up and running. I'm sorry I didn't give you more warning about the weather. This far south and so near the sea, you don't expect that kind of extreme winter. At least, I didn't personally. I blame the BBC. True, we do have the internet, but during this first decade of the new century, most ordinary people have not yet fully committed to the information revolution. The World Wide Web is there, but its incestuous marriage to the smartphone has not yet spawned its billions of loved children. Many of us continue to ignore it, and most of the rest are probably still using the internet as a work tool. The rise of social media is only just beginning, and we are still clinging to the quaint notion that we are in control of our devices, not vice versa. Basically, we have the knowledge, but we lack the skills to use it. The days of the right-swiping toddler still lie ahead of us. I don't know about you, but the state of the place comes as a shock. H and the professor tag-team us with their version of the facts about the siege of Sarajevo, and I have no reason to doubt a single word. Their top-line figures do not begin to tell the story, but they are pretty shocking nonetheless. A city of 250,000 inhabitants besieged by their neighbour's army, 10,000 citizens dead, next to nothing in or out for 4 years. Even being here does not explain this phenomenon. Medieval barbarity with modern weapons. We are now getting used to this vicious potion, but it doesn't make it any easier to swallow. It would be nice to tell the story of how the city has shot up since the war, but for Sarajevo in the noughties, shot up has a more literal meaning. Swiss cheese hole-riddled blocks of flats accompany us on our journey into town. Like some cheap TV advert for a post-apocalyptic video game, with its disclaimer not actual footage, only more real. I am sorry that I will have to leave you to discover the delights of Sarajevo without me. You are welcome to tag along with me and sit in on the work meetings with the professor and others, although 3 full days in a breakfast bar may be a bit too much of a good thing. But for me it's definitely a very good thing, probably the most worthwhile project I've been part of in my 15 years of working for a charity, and, it goes without saying, in a quarter of a century of teaching. Alright, I've just said it, but you know what I mean. In order to understand what a lowly number cruncher come keyboard botherer like me is doing here, helping to improve the lot of this country's older population, you need to know a little about the topsy-turvy world of charities. Are you sitting comfortably? Then please don't fall asleep. Around the time of the millennium, I was lucky enough to get a job in the research department of a national charity with the quaint but accurate name of Help the Aged. Yes, that really isn't grav, it's there to distinguish the old folks from cheese and fine wine. I ferreted away happily for them, and occasionally for its half-sister charity Help Age International. All went swimmingly until Princess Diana died. She had been the patron of Help the Aged. Patronage of both national older people's charities then passed to the same member of the royal family. His belief in knocking heads together and simplifying matters at a stroke may not have been responsible for merging my employer with Age Concern England. But the result was something called the Highgrove Agreement. In a nutshell, 2 big charities became one smaller one. And that's not the topsy-turvy bit. Charities need to make money, but must not make a profit, so they lead a hand-to-mouth existence, passing round the begging bowl for every intervention they want to make. First you have to prove there's a need for your help, even where it's blindingly obvious. You have to play the game. No matter how urgent the need is, some muggins has to summarize all the available research and help the team make the case to government and to potential donors. But in some cases, the evidence simply doesn't exist, and you have to commission new studies. As a researcher and all-round desk jockey, I'm not particularly thorough, but I'm speedy. With Bosnia, the new research has been done, but it's not ready for use as a lobbying and fundraising tool. Step forward, Mr. Quick-Fit Muggins, but even for the surreal world of international philanthropy, the Bosnian job is rather special. In order to unlock the coffers of charities, even our own employers, and of governments around the world, we are having to jump through more hoops than a Honolulu hula dancer. In the course of the tortuously slow recovery from the devastation of war, it soon became clear that the majority of old people have no income whatsoever, particularly in remote rural areas. They have to rely on help from their families and the generosity of neighbors, most of whom are dirt poor themselves. That may not sound too unusual, but these communities have lost their middle generations who fled to safety or died in the war. There are many villages and small towns which have been hollowed out in this way, leaving the old and the infants to fend for themselves. The choice for the old folks is simple, to starve or to work until they drop, so the government of Bosnia and Herzegovina has had to commission independent research to prove that the situation is as dire as it knows it is. Fortunately, our charities had the foresight to fund the research and to hand the project over to the astonishing Professor Z. We call her Z, pronounced Z in the American style, for no apparent reason, but I associate it with thoroughness and tenacity, with mastering a topic from A to Z. The Bosnian Minister for something or other social, yes, I know that's not her proper title, but it's the best I can do. She asked Professor Z to write a report on the plight of older people in post-war Bosnia. We helped fund Professor Z for a year, and she has now finished her draft report. In order to find how the old folks of Bosnia are doing, she lit upon the novel idea of asking them, every single one of them. With no money for this kind of research, she recruited an army of older volunteers across the country. Of course, She couldn't reach everyone, but she probably got results back from 2/3 of them, which is nothing short of miraculous. So all the boxes are ticked, and Professor Z has written an academically watertight 400-page report, so we are ready to present it to the Minister and the world. Right? Unfortunately, we are not. With only 3 days to go before the launch of the report, we are still short of a press release and an executive summary, both in Bosnian and, crucially, in English, so that's why they need a quick fit. The report as it stands is vital evidence, but you can't present the United Nations and that mob with a doorstop of a book written in a language nobody speaks. I ought to be flattered, but I'm terrified. Huddled in our hotel's cozy breakfast room, the professor and I survey the extent of the wonderful research and the enormous task ahead of us. Join us for a few minutes. Here we are staring at her steam-driven computer, ploughing through pages, drinking excellent coffee and desperately trying to stay on the internet. Z's English is better than my Bosnian, but that's not saying anything at all. The brutal truth is that it's just not up to the job. She takes me through her version of the 3-page summary, and once I have painfully got the gist, it becomes clear that it's not so much an executive summary as a summary execution. Like so many academics, she is incapable of selecting key points for a lay audience, because, to her, all the research is equally fascinating. So I get her to play the sugar lump game for each bullet point in the existing summary that, in my humble opinion, tells our target audience something we need them to know. I give the patient professor a lump of sugar. As dusk draws in, we complete her 27 key points, and she has got 3 sugar lumps. To be fair, we are now much more on the same wavelength, but language difficulties are making progress painfully slow. And it's not even Google's fault. For some reason totally unfathomable to me, the Bosnian internet does not allow us to access Google Translate. So close to the millennium, machine translation is in its infancy, and we know that infants are defined in humans as a loud noise at one end and no sense of responsibility at the other. But Google Translate would have been useful. Instead, we have intercourse translotty. Using ICTL to interpret these summary points has not been too successful so far. Just to add the cherry on the landfill, Internet translation doesn't recognize Bosnian as a language, so we are having to use Croatian instead. Hell would freeze over before Z would use Serbian. And why should we worry when things are going so well? For instance, I have learned today that
Campground of Senile Grav Most in Bukolic Arena.
and
Tiste general over 6-5 birta $3 sots journal subsistable.
time to call it a day and regroup in the morning. Let's go for a short walk in the twilight. Z wants to show us something on her way home. Snow is piled high on either side of our riverside street. It's only a 5-minute slide to a small but pretty bridge. Personally, I have always been a fan of farce. It is a dramatic tradition ideally suited to the French belief that there is something really funny about the inevitability of tragedy. It may seem callous, not to say perverse, to find humour lurking in the murders which sparked off one of the greatest tragedies of the modern era, but I find it hard to listen to the story of what happened right here barely 100 years ago without mental images flashing up, ranging from the Keystone Cups, through Carry On Up the Khyber, to wacky races. That's not the tone the learned professor is looking for. As she leads us to the streets next to the bridge, she paints us a picture of the protagonists, Gavrilo Princip and his fellow Black Hand fanatics, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, his wife and their ridiculous hangers-on, the pompous and incompetent town council. The way Z tells it, one of Princip's co-conspirators threw a bomb at the Archduke's car, but it bounced off and blew up the car behind. The visitors sheltered in the town hall until it was decided that they should go out again to visit their injured comrades in hospital. This meant another journey across town in an open-topped car, accompanied by what was left of the bodyguards. The Archduke apparently didn't wear a bullseye sign saying "shoot me," but he might as well have done. Princip had by now given up all hope of assassination and decided he could murder a coffee instead. As he was sipping it, he watched a 3-car cavalcade coming towards him across the Latin Bridge. 2 cars went left, but Franz Ferdinand's driver went straight on. Realizing his mistake, he stops the car here. He points to a random bit of tarmac, and he tries to turn back. He engages reverse gear and promptly stalls. At this point, the artist formerly known as Princip strolls over to the sitting Duke and shoots him at point-blank range. It is hard to draw a moral from this series of cock-ups, but it's tempting to say that if you want to avoid a devastating world war, you'd better learn how to double declutch. I am sorry I won't be able to go with you on your walking tour of Sarajevo today, but I think Z and I have finally sorted out how to get what we need out of her research. Her report stays firmly closed as I play the part of an inquisitive ignoramus, a role for which I seem to be ideally suited. This allows Z to act as the learned professor explaining a simple concept to a clueless fresher, which is hardly a big leap for her either. I type naive question 1 into old intercourse and press the Croatian button. She stifles a snort of laughter and translates into proper Bosnian. Her answer comes back to me in English, and, after the obligatory stifled snort, I put it into the jargon that will speak to our target audience. Reluctantly, I omit the word socks, which appears in almost every sentence. Like some darn manifestation of Husserl's Tourette, we raise a toast in coffee for each completed bullet point. By number 10, it's beer. To celebrate the 15th and final point, the owner of the hotel brings out the plum brandy. It tastes bloody awful, but apparently it's very good for you bend. Tomorrow we have time for a bit of sightseeing and shopping, which here is unfortunately much the same thing. Why not celebrate the triumph of commerce over war by buying a shiny brass shell casing repurposed as a novelty cigarette lighter or lamp stand, and good luck with airport security. But if you really want to get under the skin of this city, come with me for a couple of brief encounters. H is keen for me to meet another academic. He's a distinguished-looking man in a very smart suit. Apparently, he's on his way to the opera. In the early 90s, he was in fact her English professor and she was his star student. The warmth of their greeting is a sign of a close bond between them. Public displays of affection are rare here, but otherwise it's easy to forget you are in a Muslim city. During the siege of Sarajevo, the two of them hired trains to take children to safety in Slovenia. This new kindertransport must have been a terrific effort for 2 private citizens. But they tell their story with genuine humility. And so to dinner, not in some cozy restaurant or traditional inn, but in the middle of a shopping mall. As it turns out, it's the only one of its kind in Bosnia and the trendiest place to see and be seen. The word that first springs to mind is cafeteria, but the food is good in the old Yugoslav meat and 3 cabbage sort of a way. Suddenly H is enveloped in a warm embrace and the Minister for Social Wits sits down to join us. She is delighted that the research is now politician-friendly and ready for the big launch. It all seems rather conspiratorial, and I suddenly understand that Sarajevo is like a big village, where everyone seems to know everybody else and gossip is rife, a sort of umbrage with minarets. The Minister does little to dispel that impression with her parting shot. You know, you should persevere with our plum brandy. It is better than it tastes. We head back to our beautiful Rococo gem of a hotel. H is tired and heads straight for her room. Give me a ring when you are ready for breakfast, she says. We don't knock on doors here. I have a mental image of a family cowering in their house, dreading the sound of brutal soldiers hammering at their door, and then the thought strikes me, although it has been perfectly obvious all along. This is a city in trauma, still unable to come to terms with the wickedness of war. Perhaps the minister is right. Let's raise a glass of Dougie plum brandy to our hosts and down it in one, hoping it doesn't touch the sides.